All right, so Duskray, history or evolution of the guild Faceless. Okay, so I made Faceless officially in 2011 on the Vulak server. I knew nothing about what it took to be the best in Everquest. I came back from a huge, long hiatus. I don't even think I started on Vulak the day it came out. Like, I think I came like the day after, which already, if you're racing, like, you lost. I didn't know that mages were overpowered. Like, I didn't know anything. Totally clueless newbie. I had never done any serious raiding ever. I just went out there and I made a guild. I wanted to name it the Black Company after a series of books I like, but it was taken. So I just picked Faceless because it sounded kind of similar-ish thematically. And I made it, and I just started inviting every person I saw who didn't have a guild tag. That was how Faceless got started. The worst way you could possibly start a guild. And I started yelling in general chat like, hey, I was a teenager back then, by the way, so don't judge me too harshly, but I was a teenager. I started yelling in general chat, hey, I just created this guild called Faceless. We're going to be the best guild on Vulak. If you want to be in the #1 guild on the server, join us. And we got like 100, 200 applicants right away. Accepted them all because why not? And it was just chaos. And we were not, nor were we ever the top guild on the server. We were always the second place guild until we left. We did have a rotation with EOE, which was the actual top guild for a long time. But egos between me and Damdor, the leader of EOE, just, made that rotation fall apart. What actually happened was we worked on a rotation with EOE, and it was, for some reason, we thought it was cool to make a 50-50. So they would take 50%, we would take 50%. And then I went around to all the other guilds slowly, one by one, and I was like, hey, you guys should try getting some raid mobs. It's working for us. Look, we get half of all the raid mobs on the server. It could probably work for you too. And they'd be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. When do you think we should try? And I'd be like, this day, and this day. All EOE's raid nights. And before long, they noticed that no one was contesting our raids, but someone was always contesting their raids. And that was the end of the rotation. So my little tricks didn't work. And there was also this huge macro questing thing that happened back then with Shadow Knights. Like, you had to macro quest Shadow Knights and abuse harm touch and stuff. It was a lot of not fun. But yeah, so we did that, and that was kind of it. That was Vulak. I left when our server was just really overwhelmed by the macro quests and the Shadow Knights, and instead we went to the test server. And I was like, okay, I just want to be able to explore the content, right? Like, I want to do the content that I never did as a kid. So we made the Faceless Order on test. And we did all the way up from Classic through House of Thule on test server with this all-volunteer guild. We just, self-enforced the level limits and everything, and we would never progress to the next expansion until we had killed all the raid mobs in the previous one. That was a lot of fun. Really a lot of fun because there's no pressure, and we had a really wonderful community there. And my buddy Tudadar, aka the King, you guys might know him from some of these servers, former officer from Ascent. He and I used to always chat, and we were talking about, like, what the hardcore guild would do on the next TLP server. And I was like, basically that became the pressure cooker where we decided how we were going to run the next server. And my goal was to keep TFO alive until the new TLP was announced. And then we would just take that guild and boom, port them right over. Which wasn't really a thing that happened back then. Because like the original two progression servers, you had FOH versus ROI and Wrathful Inquisition. And then the other server had just pretty much Insidious Vision and Agnarr Strikeforce. None of those guilds reformed. None of those guilds reformed for Fippy Dark Paw and Vulak. So having a singular guild go server to server wasn't a thing at that point. But sure enough, 3 years later, because they were a lot slower to come out with them back then. 3 long years later, okay, we're going to go to Kanos and we're going to run to North Piranha. They announced Ragefire. I was working the day that Ragefire came out. I'm in the military. I was working like a 12-hour on and off schedule. So I was like, well, there goes that dream. Guess that's dead. And then they announced Lockjaw a couple days later, and it was on a period of time where I was off. And I was like, all right, full steam ahead. We joined. And I literally, we took the guild, but the guild on test was pretty casual, and I knew what I needed for this. So I went on the forums and I said, hey, Faceless is recruiting for Lockjaw. I'm looking for people who are willing to play 20 to 24 hours per day until all the server firsts are done. I'm looking for people who will allow me to tell you to direct you on what class you will play. And I will place you in a static group, and I will tell you where you should level with those people. And if you can tolerate all this, let me know. Apply. And we had a bunch of people apply. So, the history there is kind of like everybody knows it, right? Server came and went. We crushed it. We did a lot of great things on Lockjaw. Unfortunately for me, like I said, I still had that 12 hours on and off schedule. I had periods where I would have like 5 days off in a row, and then I'd be back on 7 days of nighttime. So I didn't want to lead the guild because it's a huge responsibility. If you've never led a guild, it takes like all the time you could possibly muster and then more. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to lead the guild. I said that I would stay in the guild in an officer position, leadership type role until all the server firsts were done in Classic. And then top guilds never lose, right? They never die. So then I would just pass it off. This guild that we used to be friends with called Black Syndicate had some members join us. And one of their officers named Darth is the guy who I selected to be the leader. This ended up being a very poor decision on my part. And that's about all I'll say on that. But if you've heard a bunch of terrible things, chalk it up to me making that decision and that being the wrong decision. But the guild still did great. I ended up staying a lot longer than I expected because there was some serious stiff competition on Lockjaw at one point, and I was not comfortable leaving the server until I ensured that that competition was gone. And the day the competition, who shall not be named, quit the server was also the last time I logged into the server. Then Agnarr was announced. Basically formed that guild on Fires of Heaven forums with a bunch of pals. A ton of people from Lockjaw came out again, and then a lot of new folks too. Crushed Agnarr, had a lot of fun. After that, Agnarr went on for all the way through Pop. The guild crushed that, but that's where the server stopped. So Faceless Empire was the guild there. They're the top guild until the server was done. Then we went to Cello, had a big guild rivalry. Ice-T talked some trash, and now the guild on Cello is about to be the second guild to ever go the distance on a TLP server. They're about to hit live, and it's going to be really cool to see them do